Good afternoon. I'm going to call this meeting this public hearing to order. Hello and welcome to the people that are attending virtually to our public hearing on the proposed rule for the Washington State Register number 24-21-094 for the 2025 season setting proposal. Thank you so much for joining us today remotely. My name is Scott Bird, and I am the Agency Rules Coordinator for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Today's date is March 17th, 2025. The time is now 1:01 p.m. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be made available online on our rulemaking page shortly after the meeting has concluded. I'd also like to state for the record that Director Kelly Susswind is attending today's hearing. This public hearing was noticed on the CR 102 or Code Revisor Rule Publication 102 Rule Proposal, which was filed on February the 4th, 2025. We will have a presentation to brief you on the rule proposal itself, and then we will take public comment from attendees. When it is your turn to testify, the host will call your name and unmute you. Please keep your comments or questions to 3 minutes or less to allow enough time for everyone to speak. At this time, we have registered 2 people who've signed up to comment or ask questions during this rule hearing. With that, let's just jump straight into the presentation. I'd like to introduce the following individuals. Kyle Garrison is the department's ungulate section manager and manager of this rule project, along with Stephanie Landry, who is an environmental planner for the department, and Kyle Spraggins, who manages game and waterfowl. The order of the presentation today, it will be first Stephanie Landry, followed by Kyle Spraggins, and then last by Kyle Garrison. I'll turn it over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Scott. Give me just a moment to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Sure. Okay, thank you. All right. I am Stephanie Landry. I'm the Carnivore Section Manager in the Wildlife Program. And today I'm bringing forward WAC 220-412-070, Big Game and Wild Turkey Auction Raffle and Special Incentive Permits. The proposed amendments to this rule are to remove spring bear hunting dates to align with Commission direction, as well as to update the fall bear hunting dates to align with the recommended general bear harvest season. This is for the Northeast, Southeast, and North Central Washington Big Game raffle permits. As of today, there's been no public input received for this rule proposal. And with that, I can take any questions.
No question for me.
Thank you, Kelly.
Are there any comments on this agenda topic from the public?
I'm not seeing any. Jamie, are you aware of any comments coming in?
Not at this time for season setting. We are going to take the public comment after all presentation has been done and just ask them to comment on the WAC that they are presenting or would like to comment for.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Okay, let's go with Kyle Spraggins next.
There we go. Hopefully my screen is sharing.
We can see it.
Great. All right. Good afternoon, Director Susswind. For the record, my name is Kyle Spraggins. I am the department's waterfowl section manager. And today I will be briefing you on proposals related to waterfowl and other migratory game birds within Washington Administrative Code section There we go. 220-416-060 for updates to the annual migratory game bird seasons and regulations for the 2025-26 season. Migratory game birds refer to a suite of species, including ducks, geese, coot and snipe, mourning dove, and band-tailed pigeons, or migratory birds under the federal authority granted by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act that mandates the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to consider species status and acceptability for regulated harvest, with further guidance on the process involved in issuing the annual regulations for migratory game bird hunting. So what waterfowl hunters experience every waterfowl season is the final outcome of balancing federal law, federal authority with state laws and state regulations through flyway coordination that culminates in the waterfowl regulations pamphlet that the agency produces every July. So the timeline for this particular process for consideration of the 25-26 seasons started back in July 2024 and culminates with the state season selections that are due to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service by the end of April. This process is specifically addressed in a 2013 FSEIS, addressing the process used by the U.S. Department of Interior and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to issue annual regulations for the hunting of migratory birds. Perhaps the most important point to emphasize is that the ability to inform this annual decision-making process takes a tremendous effort of monitoring by teams across North America to collect annual population survey data, band-derived data, and harvest-derived data every year. In Washington, with 35 species of waterfowl, it's my section's task to work with our flyway partners to ensure we keep up this management legacy. Duck and goose management is approached differently due to the ecology and management considerations between the two. And so I'll start with the ducks. The primary source of information tracking waterfowl populations comes from the Waterfowl Breeding Population and Habitat Survey, often shorthanded as BPOP surveys, covering broad swaths of important waterfowl breeding areas in the prairie potholes of Canada and into Alaska. The BPOP involves 80,000 miles of aerial transects covered by a minimum of 12 aerial survey teams to conduct the traditional breeding population transects in Alaska, Canada, and portions of the U.S. The 2024 Waterfowl Breeding Population and Habitat Survey was completed cooperatively across international borders. The traditional survey transects have been flown since 1955, and the long-term nature of this data set has proven critical to help management decisions, including to inform the 2 summers that the survey was canceled due to COVID restrictions. In addition to counting pairs and flocks of all waterfowl encountered, these crews are recording information about the status of ponds, as wetland habitat conditions is an important proxy to potential waterfowl reproduction. Continued consecutive summers of problematic drought conditions have maintained concern about these ensuing declines, particularly in the prairie nesting ducks. And as of summer 2024, 8 of the 10 principal duck species have continued to decline from the historic peak of 2015, largely due and driven by these drought conditions in southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, and North Dakota, that region known as the prairie potholes and the adjacent parklands. This area often functions as a major boom or the sort of upward pulse in the cyclic nature of waterfowl production, particularly in dabbling ducks like mallard and northern pintail. But the flyway system has long recognized that the typical movement patterns displayed by different species that result in a combination of stocks flowing through the Pacific Flyway, that area that connects breeding areas in Alaska and Canada to states west of the Rocky Mountains, all the way south into Mexico and beyond during fall, winter, and spring. The Pacific Flyway states again completed the traditional transects with a complete survey effort in the summer 2024 to have breeding survey information to help inform the anticipated impacts between these habitat population level expectations for production. These relationships are further informed by annual banding operations, which have largely operated at full capacity throughout the Pacific Flyway. For the 29th consecutive season now, duck season regulations have been informed by adaptive harvest management having stabilized regulations by utilizing this information from the combination of breeding surveys, banding, and harvest reporting, the longest stretch of stabilized regulations since the formal creation of the flyway management model in the late 1940s. However, wetland conditions have continued to remain strained, influenced by these drought patterns in several important zones over the past several summers, most prevalent in the southern regions of the breeding areas that significantly influence the Pacific flyway waterfowl populations like southern Alberta, interior British Columbia, and here in Washington state. Since 2010, the Pacific Flyway has further refined and standardized the duck breeding population aerial surveys, informing our season structures, including aerial surveys conducted specifically in Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California, and structuring the federal framework bounds for our duck seasons here in the Pacific Flyway. Those areas designated in the orange in that lower right map. From these efforts, the Western Mallard Adaptive Harvest Management Model prescribes the 29th season of stabilized season and bag limit structure. For the Pacific Flyway, this provides a total season length that may not exceed 107 days and may include a 7 total duck bag limit, remembering that duck species are considered in the aggregate, and unless species or sex-specific restrictions are specified, remain at the 7. Up to 7 of these may be mallard, but no more than 2 hen mallards. The federal framework allowances in the Pacific Flyway are more than any of the other 3 flyways due to balancing considerations of the total hunter numbers and the typical 100 days of field that are put forth by those hunters. And mallards drive this system due to their broad breeding distribution, their overall abundance, and their highly desirable status in waterfowl harvest. But obviously, mallards are not representative of all other duck species. Therefore, certain duck species have prescribed national strategies for species that are able to be monitored by breeding populations, meaning making use of those traditional BPOP surveys, and that distribute broadly through multiple flyways during migration and winter periods. 2 species that have national strategies that inform harvest options are northern pintail, which remains in suppressed population status due to poor nesting habitat conditions in southern Alberta and Saskatchewan, and scaup, specifically driven by lesser scaup that have remained below long-term averages compared back to 1955. A major change for the 2025-26 season is that after more than a decade with improved understanding of the relationship between harvest and breeding population, thanks to continued banding efforts by teams across the continent, a significant revisit of the northern pintail harvest strategy has led to an interim strategy that provides an alternative of a 3 pintail daily bag limit under certain breeding population levels. Note, there is no alternative that allows greater than 3 pintail to be considered, as their breeding habitat remains highly impacted in portions of the prairies and parkland regions. But with this decade of harvest recovery data, this improved model now makes use of annual updates provided by the band recoveries and the harvest surveys known as the parts collection survey that represents a significant improvement to understanding the system. Both it is worth noting that both remain in this most restrictive harvest option, and these both populations are below their long-term averages. But yeah, so the with that pintail change, that 3 daily bag limit is still allowed to operate at the full 107-day season, whereas the scaup restrictive limit continues to operate on that shortened 86-day season length. Finally, there are duck species that are not reliably detected in the traditional surveys, meaning up on the breeding grounds. And that is both because of their range and their unique ecology considerations. And for example, the sea ducks are the group of ducks that we often have to invoke sort of a separate line of understanding and data collection. The breeding distribution of most sea ducks are not aligned well with those traditional transects flown, both in placement on the landscape, but also in the timing of the nest initiation in comparison to these other waterfowl species, specifically the dabbling ducks, making for several of these species incredibly difficult to track population status during the breeding period. Additionally, adequate sample sizes of band recoveries, allowing us to derive estimates for survival or harvest rate, are unobtainable through those traditional waterfowl management techniques. You just can't capture enough of them to make enough of a harvest recovery be meaningful. So we have to collect this information in a much more demanding way through direct estimates of both the winter population status and the hunter harvest in order to derive a crude harvest rate. So beginning in the mid 1990s, WDFW designed a survey that flies approximately 4,000 miles of shoreline transect and offshore waters at 200 feet off the water by an exceptionally skilled crew of staff and a long-term partnership with Kenmore Air. Those transects are shown in that green map on the slide. In Washington, because they are ducks, the outer bounds of the season dates is a function of the frameworks triggered by that Western mallard adaptive harvest management model. So as a result, sea duck seasons retain the potential of a full 107-day duck season length and the potential of a 7-duck daily bag limit. As the majority of sea ducks occur in Western Washington during the waterfowl hunting season, restrictions related to sea ducks are taken at state discretion and applied specifically to the Western Washington Duck Zone, one of 2 zones legally defined in federal frameworks. And additionally, we have a special authorization that is accompanied with a mandatory harvest report that is required and has been required since the 2004-2005 season. From this, a harvest strategy was explicitly created around scoters, the most abundant sea duck that's out on the Salish Sea waters, within the WDFW game management plan, setting a winter population objective and thresholds that trigger bag limit considerations. With the most recent survey information that derives a winter index, which is the most recent available 3 years of aerial survey data, surf scoter winter index of 75,000, just over 75,000, indicates that for the first time since 2009, a moderate regulation package, which would allow for a 3 scoter daily bag limit, would be allowed. This is a component of a broader sea duck harvest strategy document presented to and endorsed by the Fish and Wildlife Commission in 2013. However, there was a revisit of this bag limit consideration in comparison to that harvest strategy. As we have now 20 seasons of experience with the using that mandatory harvest report, this has allowed a reevaluation of those crude harvest rates in relation to the winter population estimate that has allowed us to use the actual observed hunter days of field compared to total harvest. These 2 examples of a 2 daily bag limit on the top and a 4 daily bag limit on the bottom for scoters was what was predicted in that harvest strategy. However, using this observed harvest card derived data, we have observed that the actual achieved harvest days of field, which have reached levels far higher than what would have been predicted in the 2013 strategy. The gray zone would have been what was sort of the upper limit. We now know that we can hit up towards about 2,600 days of field towards sea ducks. And so with that, revisiting and finding this ability to keep the overall harvest rate below 5%, we are proposing that a 3 daily bag limit for surf scoter is a more acceptable and sustainable option for the bag limit for surf scoters going forward. Similarly, we now have a history of understanding a better sort of relationship between that 100-day of field and the resulting total harvest for goldeneye. We have 2 species of goldeneye, commons and barrows. And the harvest guidelines, similar to the scoters, target a harvest rate that is under 5%. With the most recent 3-year average exceeding 50,000, goldeneyes are in good status. But the secondary concern is about keeping a harvest level on Barrow's goldeneye that does not exceed 2 on average, an equivalent of 2 on average across the season. Running a similar scenario, using the information that we now have from the harvest record cards, we can see that we can keep the overall harvest rate below 5% and retain the Barrow's goldeneye under that 2 level, given that Barrow's goldeneye show up about 55% of the total harvest. So by following that 3 daily bag limit increase with scoters, we can also allow a 3 goldeneye daily bag limit as well. Longtail ducks have continued to be stable, as have harlequin duck at just lower population levels in comparison to the scoter and goldeneye. And so to put this in summary, the status of all of the sea ducks allows for harvest opportunity to be maintained with the continued requirement of a harlequin duck, with harlequin duck managed under a limited user entry permit. As an update to this past season's rollout of the limited user entry for harlequin duck, we can see that there was actually quite high demand. We allowed 38 limited user permits to be made available in 2024. There were 517 total applications for those 38 permits. 37 of those 38 wound up actually being purchased and utilized. 34 of the 37, or almost 92%, were compliant in their report by February 15th. Of which about 21 confirmed harvest and an estimated upper end of 23 total harvest of the harlequin ducks permits. And to date, we have about 12 voluntarily submitted DNA samples for further analysis of the stock origin of these harlequin ducks. In short, it was wildly successful and certainly allowed us to maintain a sustainable harvest in the face of a high demand and interest. But we've gone further than that. In the past several years, we have reinvoked or reinitiated what is referred to as the boat-based composition survey. This is a 234 1-kilometer transects assessing the sex and age composition of harlequin duck across Washington's waters of the Salish Sea. These surveys are conducted in February when the plumage allows for the greatest potential differentiation between these cohorts within the population, meaning males from females and adults from juvenile. And in the most recent 2 years, the crews have assessed well over 1,600 ducks in harlequin ducks specifically in each of those years. From these surveys, we were able to make a technical adjustment to that calculation for the available permits. First, harlequin duck, like most ducks, are a male bias system, where approximately 57% of the wintering birds are male based on those boat-based survey results. Males, and specifically that distinction between adult and first-year males, is the direct observation that the teams and the crews are making during those boat-based surveys. This means that there's a group of unpaired adult males within the population. Approximately 88% of the males of that male portion of the cohort are observed to be adults. Similar to previous observed ratios for the baseline that was developed in 2008 through 2010 using similar boat-based methodologies. Given that the harvest is adult male biased, this allows us to more specifically calculate the number of available permits based on keeping that harvest rate at 3% of adult males, and is illustrated in this figure in the lower right of the slide. So, in revisiting the way that we get to the available number of permits, an explicit goal of striving to allow harlequin duck to be above the long-term average of 4,772 harlequin ducks is still maintained. Using that winter index from the aerial survey and the sex and age ratios from the boat-based surveys conducted in February, This allows us to derive that there are approximately 2,294 adult males, which includes paired and unpaired adult males. A comparison of the most recent winter index to that desired long-term average indicates that we're still below, meaning that we're targeting this 3% harvest rate. And finally, applying a wounding loss correction defined as 30% of the retrieved harvest allows us to maintain or to determine that there is a number of permits to be allocated. So following that logic, the total number of available permits for the 25-26 season would be 52 Harlequin duck permits. So bringing this all together for the ducks, with those considerations, the 29th season of stabilized duck season structure would result in the following adjustments. There would be a 107-day total season, of which there is a 2-day closure that allows for a youth hunt in September, and the youth hunt and veteran and active military hunt in January 31st in this case. That results in a total of 105 days available for the general season that would start on October 11th. That 2-day closure would be maintained on Monday, October 20th, and Tuesday, October 21st. Oh, sorry. Within that, 7 total duck bag limit to include no more than 2 hen mallards. The adjustment based on the national strategy to a 3 pintail daily bag limit, 2 redheads, 2 canvasback, 2 scaup with that shortened 86-day season, which is the same as in previous seasons. And in Western Washington, the West Zone, the sea duck reduced bag limits would be adjusted to include a 3 Scoter daily bag limit, a 3 Goldeneye daily bag limit, a 2 long-tailed duck daily bag limit, and that the Harlequin duck is closed to harvest statewide, except through that limited number of issued permits, which would be adjusted to 52 permits in the 25-26 season. So up next are the geese. Considerations of goose populations, presence, status, and composition mixtures throughout the state are what is used to develop the goose management areas across the state. These management zones are formalized in federal framework and allow the ability to influence season structure and the goose type specific bag limits, which have only been in place since the 2017-2018 season, while staying within that ultimate framework guidance of 107 days per species, and that no season may extend past March 10th, both specifications within the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the international treaties. With geese, we have to think about those that we have here as breeders, only Western Canada goose shown in this illustration, versus the 6 species encompassing 13 populations that originate from elsewhere. As such, geese differ because cooperative flyway management plans create the federal framework outer bounds and help guide appropriate harvest strategies considering distribution and timing of those populations as they move throughout the flyway, from as far away as Russia and Arctic Canada to as far south as Baja Bays and the Central Highlands of Mexico. Given that there are several proposals that are specific to the geese, it is worth providing some context. And so I want to walk through the Canada and cackling goose bag limit. There are 7 different subspecies of Canada and cackling goose. Westerns are the only in-state nesting species and subspecies of this similar looking goose. However, Washington goose harvest relies significantly on a significant number of Western Canada geese that actually come from out of country, originating in portions of Alberta. While both Vancouver, Canada, and Aleutian cackling geese can be encountered during harvest, it is extremely rare, and it is almost exclusively in Goose Management Area 2. So the population status of those two, of Vancouver and Aleutians, do not directly influence the season structure or the bag limit considerations like the remaining 5 subspecies. Dusky Canada geese in the red box have always shaped regulations within what is known as the permit zones, which refer to the Willamette Valley and coastal regions of Oregon and the southwest 5 counties of Washington. Duskies have been closed to harvest since a closure of the mandatory harvest check stations beginning in the 2016 season. They are an extremely low abundance goose population, in one of the lowest in the world. In yellow are the cacklers, or the minima subspecies. These are the smallest body size of all of the subspecies. They're only slightly larger than a big mallard, and the entire population nests in western Alaska, almost exclusively on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. This goose population accounts for a significant proportion of the bag in the permit zone and plays an extremely important role in the ecology of other nesting waterfowl populations on the YK Delta, as well as serving as a significant role in food security in coastal villages of the YK Delta. These 2 subspecies distinctly shape the harvest regulations for the Goose Management Area 2 coast and inland zones. All taken into toll, the current status of all of these subpopulations, including lesser Canada geese and Tavner's cackling geese, are all in bad status. They are either below long-term averages or approaching closure zones, as in the case of cacklers, that would mandate us under federal framework to close seasons. And so trying to avoid that going into the future, there are proposals for bag limit reductions for all goose management areas related to Canada and cackling goose. Specifically, in Goose Management Area 2, coast and inland, there is by federal framework, there is a bag limit reduction to 2 daily for the Canada and cackling goose bag limit, that no season dates may be allowed after February 15th, and that the total season structure may not exceed 74 days in season length for Canada cackling geese in this zone. The images shown to you are a comparison of what the current season that we just went through, the 24-25 season versus the 25-26 season, would look like structurally. Again, dates after February 15th are not allowed, and this results in a truncation of the season in certain in the coastal zone. But to be within bounds of that 74-day season length, the resulting segments that are laid out here, trying to follow similar patterns of the previous season, would look this way. There would be 3 distinct segments in the inland zone, but there would only be 2 season segments in the coastal zone. Further, beyond that, in areas that are distinctly influenced by westerns, lesser Canada geese, and Tavner's cackling geese, essentially all of the other goose management areas, and with the additional knowledge based on a collaborative project with Alaska Department of Fish and Game, putting a large number of banded individuals back out into the population, has resulted in us understanding that our current harvest rates on these, particularly the Tavners and the lessers, are approaching or are around 20%, which is an unsustainable harvest rate in any goose population. And with that, a reduction of the Canada cackling goose bag limits in these other goose management areas to 3 daily is warranted. Shifting to white geese, Goose Management Area 1 white goose bag limits are proposed to be reduced. This is because while the overall status of the Wrangel Island population of snow geese has been increasing, in the most recent years it has begun to decline, but that decline has been even further accentuated in the Skagit region. The Pacific Flyway Management Plan for Wrangel Island population of snow geese has explicit harvest strategies for the winter flock of Skagit-Fraser region, the region that we refer to as Goose Management Area 1. And that recent winter surveys have shown this declining winter number, with the number of adults approaching the threshold that would require further restrictions mandated by federal framework. At current levels, based on these current levels, the proposal is to reduce the bag limit during the dates up until January 25th to a 6 daily bag limit, and those dates after February 15th to a 10 daily bag limit. In Goose Management Area 4, continued banding and transmitter studies have clearly demonstrated that the winter flock of snow geese in the Columbia Basin is of Wrangell Island origin. But unlike the Skagit-Fraser flock, there is no historic distribution known to winter in the Columbia Basin. And in most recent years, the winter count in Goose Management Area 4 has now exceeded that of the Skagit-Fraser winter flock for the most recent 6 consecutive years, with more than 160,000 snow geese being counted during these winter surveys. Crafting seasons in this region has been complicated and is complicated by the fact of when the geese first arrive into this Goose Management Area 4, which is extends the entire north-south latitude of Washington State. But after reviewing more information from the harvest results, and considering comments from goose hunters that are very familiar with this zone, there is a recommended adjustment to shift the closure date later that breaks up the segments of the season, and to shift that February-March late season later, all the way to February 21st to March 8th. Again, this is to accommodate just the way that these birds are moving throughout the Columbia Basin and the influence that temperature has on the distribution throughout the season. This is to align that opportunity with when hunters actually have the opportunity to pursue these birds. Finally, for brant seasons, there is one recommended adjustment related to Pacific County. This is that the overall flyway survey triggered a restrictive regulation package that requires us to shrink the number of days that are allowed. Clallam, Whatcom, and Skagit are within that, but Pacific County needed to be truncated to be able to fall within the federal framework allowance. And so season dates could not start before January 10th, 2026. And that is reflected now in the proposal. The youth, veteran, and active military days would fall on January 31st for Clallam, Whatcom, and Pacific. But similar to Skagit, based on the most recent 3-year average, it would begin closed and would be informed by the season survey that occurs next January. Finally, season dates for the other migratory game birds. For coot and snipe, there is no suggested changes in season structure or bag limits. The same is true for mourning dove. The season would start September 1st, run through October 30th, with the similar bag limit as the previous season. And finally, band-tailed pigeon would also have a similar season structure and bag limit as compared to the previous season. And last but not least, a mention of how the falconry season dates occur. Falconry is essentially equivalent to a weapon type in waterfowl in the migratory game bird regulations. They do not have separate dates because you cannot extend the days beyond that 107-day requirement. Therefore, there are dates that overlap the season with a different bag limit structure, and any extended falconry season dates align with the youth or the youth, veteran, active military dates. Again, with a restricted bag limit specific to falconry, and the final extended dates are related to mourning dove harvest for falconry. This is no different than previous seasons, and so is status quo, just adjustments of the actual season dates. In terms of public comment, we've received well over 100 comments to date. in terms of general themes, there has been general support of the proposals. Certainly an excitement, but certainly confusion over the northern pintail bag limit adjustments, with some suggestions of sex-specific sublimits on hens, which have been evaluated and are not deemed necessary at this time in that new national interim strategy. There has been obvious confusion over the current status of goose populations, specifically as to how those populations are doing both in Washington state and the Pacific Flyway at large. There were suggested modifications to Goose Management Area 4 white goose proposed dates, which actually did influence that recommended adjustment that I presented. And finally, there is continued concern over sea ducks with those increased bag limits without the ability to regulate sea duck guide services. And the intent there is just about how fast harvest pressure, I guess you could say, can pick up when there's a lot of interest in that species, in those species types. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
No questions from me, Kyle. Thank you. Nice job.
All right, let's move on to our next presentation. Kyle?
Okay, thank you, Jamie. I will share my screen. And dial up the presentation. You let me know if I'm in the right version. Am I in full screen or you see the notes screen?
You see the notes.
Okay. To look right now?
Now it does.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Anise. Good afternoon, Director Sueswind. For the record, my name is Kyle Garrison, Ungulate Section Manager in the Wildlife Program. Pleasure to be here with you today. So I'll be presenting proposals to multi-season deer and elk tags, to elk general seasons and elk special permits, special closures and firearm restriction areas, deer area descriptions, deer special permits, and finally we'll wrap up with moose, bighorn sheep, and mountain goat special permits. So starting us off with multi-season deer and elk tags, WAC 224-12-090. This proposal is to create a pool of 60 deer and 30 elk multi-season tags for issuance to members of federally recognized tribes that have an agreement with WDFW to sell licenses. And recipients of these multi-season tags must be licensed by the department. The underlying rationale of this proposal is to provide an option of flexible licensing, a flexible licensing vehicle for participating tribes to offer a limited number of multi-season deer and elk tags to their tribal members. Participating tribes come into an agreement with WDFW, they purchase and then issue that predetermined number of multi-season deer and elk tags for their respective tribal members. And it's important to note on this proposal that the proposed tags don't authorize an increased bag limit. That's pretty consistent. That is consistent with existing multi-season tags. So that means you can hunt in multiple seasons. You can use different weapon types in those corresponding seasons, but you still only get one deer or you get one elk for that tag. We received 155 comments on this proposal, the majority of which were expressing some concern under these themes. One is that existing opportunity is already limited for deer for multi-season tags, and there's a perception of lost opportunity with the addition of multiple tags. Fairness and equity among user groups was brought up, meaning sort of state versus tribal fairness and equity in the resource. And there was comments related to that access to the multi-season tags are already available to tribal hunters through the existing system, so if they participated in the point system in the application process. Okay, so moving forward, elk general seasons, WAC 224-15-050. First proposal is to add GMU 334 to the Eastern Washington Modern Firearm Master Hunter only general season, and to extend that season to include January 1st through the 31st for 2026. That's within the 2025 license year. And we want to apply the same dates to the 2026 license year season. So I've taken a clip here. This table right here shows you what really the WAC looks like Blue is going to consistently be throughout this presentation new material. Anything in red will be sort of what was in the WAC previously. So here we're just adding GMU 334 to this existing hunt. We're saying and you need to wear your hunter orange and pink in August as a safety mechanism. And again, just adjusting those dates in 2025 and 2026. The reason for this proposal is to help address agricultural damage and mitigate that damage, as well as rangeland damage. So these GMUs are largely within restricted access military lands. It's quite a challenge to get hunters on this landscape to help address a quite abundant population of elk that uses that area as refugia. Master hunters are a really good tool for us to sort of be able to dictate special conditions for them, have them out on a landscape during special times of the year to help us address the number of elk that are on that landscape. So the next proposal is to change the legal elk for GMU 121 in northeastern Washington. During the late archery general season, we're going to shift this from any bull to any elk. So this allows, of course, bull elk to be harvested, but also antlerless elk. And the reason for that would be, again, because this is to address some agricultural damage that's started to occur and become more increasingly frequent in this GMU, with an elk population that is exhibiting growth, and with that growth, more elk on the landscape, causing a few more problems. The antlerless subpopulation is really what drives the population's trajectory, and so putting a little bit more harvest pressure on those antlerless elk will help us manage the population and again manage that damage that's occurring on those private lands. So here we see moving from GMU 121 as a restriction of any bull, moving it down into a different row, allowing that any elk. So a little bit more of an opening up for some opportunity there. Another proposal of elk general seasons is to change the legal elk for GMU 407 during modern firearm, early and late archery, and early and late muzzleloader general seasons. So we're going from any elk to 3-point minimum, kind of the opposite of what I just spoke to, and for the opposite reasons. So the North Cascades elk population for GMU 407 represents a component of that. This population has exhibited stability in its growth curve. It had a number of years where we were growing. It was very productive. It's still a productive population, but we have seen that trend level off. We want to keep it productive, but maybe manage for some more stability here. So pulling back a little bit of that antlerless opportunity, releasing those that subpopulation from some of the harvest pressure, maintaining the population kind of right where we are, and a bit of a sweet spot for that management objective there. All right, so we received 57 public comments represented across these themes with general support, general opposition. You'll see that a few times today. Folks just saying I do support or I don't support. We did hear about some concern for the allocation of antlerless opportunity based on user groups. For example, archers may be wanting more opportunity, muzzleloaders wanting more opportunity for themselves, or people expressing concern that there's not enough youth opportunity, for example. There was some concern expressed for lost opportunity, specifically, and for example, moving from any elk to 3-point or better, seen as a bit of a restriction, maybe a lost opportunity there. There was some concern expressed about a dislike of the Master Hunter opportunity or the program relative to kind of general everyday hunter opportunity. And then many comments that are unrelated to the specific proposals that I just showed you. For example, folks wanting to eliminate spike-only restrictions in Eastern Washington or concern about predator impacts on populations. Okay, moving forward to elk special permits, WAC 220-415-060. So first up, we just have a lot of date changes, a lot of individual hunts in our hunt tables in the elk special permit WAC, and we need to modify those dates every year just to maintain consistency in season timing, making sure it opens on a Saturday or it closes on a specific day, or because we want to make sure that we're putting a hunt in between two general seasons or to avoid conflict with a conflicting weapon type, for example. So here I just show you two examples shifting one day earlier in the 2025 from the 2024 season. This is a clean change. The only thing happening here are dates, but this is representative of many, many changes occurring in the hunt tables. Moving forward into kind of more adjustments to the actual permits themselves. This table on the bottom shows some adjustments to hunts that are in GMU 658 and 673. These are in the Willapa Hills elk herd in Western Washington. So we have the North River and the Williams Creek hunts here, and they're both these hunts are for antlerless, those cow elk. Again, those are kind of the drivers of populations. We want to be conservative with their take. With our population survey data, we've seen a little bit of a decrease in our cow to calf ratios, indicating we maybe want to pull back a little bit on cow harvest to make sure that we're leaving enough cows on the landscape, being productive, creating new elk to recruit into the population and replace anything that's being harvested. So modest reductions here, again, based on our survey data in the Willapa Hills. Continuing on with some permit adjustments. So these are hunts that we're modifying, either going up or going down, associated with agricultural damage mitigation. So when the permit proposals to go up, it means we have a population that's probably exhibiting some growth, changing their patterns a little bit, causing a little bit more damage, and we want to respond by applying some harvest pressure to mitigate that. If it's going down, the inverse is true, where we maybe have successfully mitigated that damage, or the population's trajectory has changed. And so we're just dialing down that antlerless take correspondingly. So I won't break down all of the changes. I just want to point out that pretty consistently we'll see red where it was last year's permit level. Blue is what's proposed for this year, the 2025 season. You'll see that we have two hunts, huckleberry and alkali hunts. These are brand new hunts in these categories for the youth and the hunters with disabilities, and then the antlerless category. I just call these out. These are associated, I showed you in the elk general season, some changes for GMU 121 for agricultural damage, GMU 371 to help address that population that's very abundant, causing some damage to agriculture and to rangeland. So adding these two new hunts in there and not changing from levels that were there last year. I'll point out too, we do have a couple of hunts here named Blue Creek. So those are GMU 154. One of them is in an elk area, which is a smaller sub area of a game management unit. These are both in the Blue Mountains elk population, a population we do have concerns about, and we're very conservative with our antlerless take in that population. However, GMU 154 is quite big. A lot of that is private lands, and the western side, a large area of that on the foothills of the Blues, still receives a lot of agricultural damage in an area where we want to make sure that we're mitigating appropriately. Okay, making some permit adjustment proposals here by adding GMU 466 to the hunt area for the Region 4 Hunter Education Instructor Incentive Permit. So you can see that single change here in this table. We'd received some feedback from some folks that have received this permit in the past. GMU 454, 460, not a lot of public lands access, fairly restricted with that private land. Good numbers of elk in this area, but again, not acting as a really great incentive for some of these folks. So adding GMU 466 here, lots of public land. While elk numbers aren't highly abundant there, the authorization of any elk in that area is not a conservation concern for that population. Adds a little bit more value for this incentive for those hardworking hunter education instructors that are lucky enough to win this permit. Similarly, on the incentive permit, we have a proposal to reduce some of our hoof disease incentive permits. And so the way these function are, if you participate, if you're a hunter in Western Washington, you participate in our hoof disease incentive program, you harvested an elk that had signs of the disease, submitted that to WDFW, we evaluate them, and then we put your name in a pool for a random draw for one of these permits here. So we're seeing a proposal from our local biologists to just lower this a little bit here in Region 5. So that's the Mount St. Helens, South Rainier, and Willapa Hills permits. And this is commensurate with sort of the amount of bulls that are on the landscape, and also kind of what we've seen as a stabilization in participation for this program. And while we want this to be a high quality incentive permit, we don't want it to be maybe a little bit overvalued. And so we're adjusting this both based on biological and some feedback that we've received from our hunters that are lucky enough to win this. So still a good incentive, just a few fewer out there in the pot. Okay, continuing down. So we have a proposal here to move the alkali and Nooksack special hunts from the quality to the bull categories. This is also just based on hunter feedback, a little bit based on what we see in our success rates from harvest data. So if success rates are declining, we want high quality, meaning you've enjoyed yourself, you've gotten yourself into a lot of animals, you've had the opportunity for harvest, meeting that quality experience. We've received some feedback that it really hasn't been doing as well in both of these hunts. And so making an adjustment to make sure that we're appropriately setting the expectation for people putting in their special permits, using their points that take many, many years to accrue. Okay, so we have some following proposals to allocate special permits proportional to hunting method and hunting method participation. And so these hunts, I thought I would break down a little bit how we do this. This is a special subset of our special permits, where for the most part they are hunts that don't have a general season equivalent. So the best example is sort of Eastern Washington. We have a lot of spike bull, true spike bull only hunting general seasons. And the branch antler bulls are offered through special permit only. We need to make sure that those special permit only hunts are allocated fairly among the different weapon types in our special permit categories. And so the way that we do this, I'm going to show you an example of a hypothetical special hunt. So this isn't a real hunt. I'm just throwing numbers out here to break down. So we have a harvest goal of 20. Our biologists have decided we can sustainably harvest up to 20 bulls in this particular hunt. So what we do is we look at hunter participation across the different weapon types. And so for elk, the majority of hunters are modern firearm hunters, so 64%. And so modern firearm hunters, their harvest goal would be 13 of the 20 overall. We follow that same logic where archery hunters are 21% of the elk hunters in the state. Their harvest goal then for this hunt is 4. Muzzleloaders, 15%. The harvest goal is 3. Now, we need to adjust these numbers based on the success rates for a special hunt, and we do that on a 5-year running average. And so if we just carry this forward a little bit more, I'll show you a table. So these are, again, fictitious numbers, but for modern firearm hunters, we have a harvest goal of 13. An average success rate of this hunt is 80%. We do a little bit of math, and we get a proposed permit level of 16. We do the same thing for archery, for muzzleloader, and we come out with a proposal for 10 permits and for 6 permits for archery and muzzleloader, respectively. So we do this for a lot of hunts. We evaluate them, and where we need to make a change, we do. And what you often see is fairly small changes, because what changes over time is less about the hunter statistics in terms of their participation across weapon types. The harvest goals don't tend to change dramatically. It's the success rates that do change, and those tend to dictate modest changes in the overall permit levels. And so you'll see here this table. I won't break down all of these numbers, but for the most part, fairly small number of changes that are occurring across these different hunts. Here we see modern firearm in the bull and the quality category. And again, these are only the hunts that needed to be changed. There are other hunts that simply didn't have anything change about them. The statistics all changed the same, and so they sit as they were in the WAC unchanged. We see archery hunts here. Again, we tend to have smaller harvest goals for archers and for muzzleloaders, so the numbers tend to be a little bit smaller here. And here's the muzzleloader table on the top. And again, typically relatively small changes that are dictated by either a change in the harvest goal or a change in the success rates over time in these specific hunts. So we break it down in the totals. We looked at 2024. There were 376 across all 3 weapon types. In 2025, there were 381 permits being offered in total across all the weapon types. So in sum, the statistics don't change a lot. It's just that rebalancing across the different weapon types individually. Okay, I've got a couple of recommended adjustments here that are administrative date changes and 1 permit change. And we needed to make these because some of these dates we just missed when we filed the CR 102. So we need to update those with the appropriate date, starting opening and closing dates. The Green River hunts are a hunt that we negotiate with Tacoma Power, which is the landowner and land manager in GMU 485, and the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe. And so that negotiation occurred after we filed the CR 102. What we needed to do is add some October dates to those 2 hunts. And then for the Green River quality hunt, we adjusted that permit level down from 8 to 4 based on, again, those discussions with our partners on this hunt. 62 comments were received that are represented in these general themes. Again, general support, general opposition. Some concern being expressed for lost opportunity or too little opportunity by user group. And user group here is among the weapon types: archery, muzzleloader, and modern firearm. A general desire being expressed for increased permit levels. General support for shifting hunt categories as we proposed, but also some concern for shifting those hunt categories. And for example, concern about impacts of special permit availability within those specific categories and the points that people have accrued for that category. So losing a hunt out of the quality category, one less hunt you can apply for with those hard-earned points. There are also many comments unrelated to the specific proposals. For again, example, concern about predation impacts or interest to shift to a limited entry only model. All right, continuing to move forward, special closures and firearm restriction areas. So the proposal here is relatively simple. It's to clarify that the Parker Lake area boundary in GME 117 is within the United States Forest Service lands and completely within the U.S. Forest Service lands. And we'd like to enroll this area in the hunt by reservation system. So the clip you see here in the center of the screen, that's the WAC language itself. What's underlined is new. Anything else was already in existing code. So if adopted, the area would be open to archery, muzzleloader, and shotgun hunters for all species except for bear, with 10 hunters being allowed per week during spring turkey and from September 1 through November 19 for those fall seasons. The reason we're able to do this is because of an agreement with both the Forest Service and the U.S. military. This is an area where the military does active training. And so for the safety of both the service members and our hunters, we needed to have pretty tight restrictions on when people can be in there. Some of that access has changed, and we were able to negotiate getting this into the hunt by reservation system. So a lot more hunters can go out and hunt this area than we had in the past under the special permit only system in this area. 37 comments were received on this proposal, general support, general opposition, and then some expression of dislike of a reservation system of any kind when it comes to hunting access on public land. Okay, moving forward to deer area descriptions, WAC 224.15.010. The proposal here is to modify deer area 1031 Parker Lake to clarify the area boundary and place it in that hunt by reservation system. So if this looks familiar, it should be. We just saw that with that firearm restriction area, the Parker Lake that I just showed you. Same rationale. So just making the WACs consistent across each other. We want to keep this deer area, but clarifying it, putting it in the hunt by reservation system, and ultimately offering expanded access to this area. 24 comments received, general support, general opposition. There was some desire to maintain existing regulations and some concern about limitations to public land access in general. Okay, WAC 224.15.030 deer special permits. Well, just like the elk special permits, lots of date changes, maintaining consistency in season timing, making sure we're opening it when we want to, avoiding conflict with other weapon types, for example. Short clip here, shifting one day earlier in October. Lots and lots of hunts have this kind of thing. I won't show you all the hunt tables here, but just lots of the hunts being adjusted in their dates, again, for the sake of consistency. We do have some permit adjustments. And so starting off, we have here adding Lincoln, Mossy Rock, and Winston hunts in the antlerless category back into the hunt table. This is actually a clerical fix. This was inadvertently deleted in an earlier version of the WAC, and so bringing it back in makes it look like a new hunt. I'm proposing it as if it looks like a new hunt, but this was in the books last year. Nothing's changed about it. We just need to make sure we're offering it again in the 2025 season. Continuing on our permit adjustments, so we have some adjustments to population status. So in this top table here, we've got second deer opportunities. On the Puget Sound Islands. These are islands where we have very abundant black-tailed deer populations, and we're often in a position trying to really manage these populations, trying to actually maybe even get them to be reduced to avoid some of this human-wildlife conflict, roadkill, agricultural issues with urban deer, etc. On Orcas, San Juan, and Lopez, however, we did have some indications that the population may have actually been reduced a little bit, and Camano Island, where we may have had some disease impacts last year. We have been fairly liberal in offering some opportunity out there to try to manage these deer populations, commensurate with the space and the habitat that they have available to them. Proposing some modest reductions here, just commensurate with what we think is a reduced population and also hunter participation in these hunts. On Whidbey Island, proposing a modest increase in the number of permits. Again, just commensurate with the population. This is a population that's very abundant, We have pretty good hunter participation, and so we want to continue to make sure that we're addressing that population and managing the number of antlerless deer in the landscape. Second proposal here is to eliminate the Parker Lake Archery Special Hunt. And now this is replaced, though, with that expanded access that I talked about before, where we get a number of hunters in every week under a general season framework, rather than having to restrict it to special permits, applications, and points. So this hunt is being proposed to go away and being replaced with a more liberal opportunity to participate in hunting in that area. Continuing on our permit adjustments, so these are also adjustments to population status. These are also Western Washington. These are either all antlerless deer or any deer, and just like elk, deer populations are a function largely of the survival and reproduction of the adult females. So we want to be conservative. We want to be careful with the way that we issue out that antlerless take. What we do with black-tailed deer is we have a partial population reconstruction. And so we use harvest data to generate a minimum number of does on the landscape, those antlerless deer on the landscape in particular units. And then we allocate harvest based on that minimum number at a very conservative level, less than 10% of that minimum number. So it's sort of conservative, baked on conservative, layered on another layer of conservative. And then we allocate these permits across the different weapon types based on participation. I showed you that with elk. I'll show it to you again with deer here in another slide. But these permit changes are sort of up and down based on, again, those harvest levels that we've seen and what we know about that population and how what that population can sustain. And these are also in relation to the amount of general season harvests that may be occurring and what we know about harvest from our tribal partners. So again, trying to be conservative with that antlerless take. Okay, so I spoke a little bit about this on elk. I'll just cut straight to the point, but show you again. We're going to talk a little bit about our resource allocation, allocating permits proportionally among user groups. This is a hypothetical hunt example with a harvest goal of 20 for deer. In this case, modern firearm hunters represent a little bit more of the deer hunters, so that's 79%, and these are real numbers, the 79%. Archers, 15%, muzzleloaders are 6% of the deer hunting population. And so in this hypothetical example, that means modern firearm hunters, a harvest goal is 16, 3 for archers, 1 for muzzleloader hunters in this, again, hypothetical example. So we look below on that table. We do a little bit of math based on that average success rate, and we're able to generate our proposed permit level. So here we have fewer hunts being impacted on the deer side. These are all Eastern Washington hunts broken through the quality category. You can see modern archery and muzzleloader. Again, typically fairly modest changes, usually a change as a result of changes in percent success rates of that hunt over a 5-year period. If you sum them up and look at last year's, in these hunts alone, we had 142, and this year we're proposing 132 permits rather. Okay, a couple of recommended adjustments. We have some administrative date changes here that were identified after we filed the CR 102. Again, you see there in the bottom 3 hunts, those are the Green River hunts that we also negotiated after the CR 102 was filed. The only change that's occurring is actually adding a few days for October 25 to 29 in addition to November 22nd to the 26th. 57 comments received are represented in general themes of support and opposition. Some concern expressed for lost opportunity or too little opportunity for a user group or a specific hunt or area. For example, youth or disabled hunter special permits were identified. There was a general desire for increased permit levels in the comments. And of course, comments not specific to the proposals. For example, in these comments, hunter crowding was a concern that was expressed. Desire for limited entry model and concern about predation impacts. Okay, moving forward, moose seasons, permit quotas and areas, WAC 220-415-070. The first proposal is a relatively straightforward one. We've got to modify the WAC to reflect the current license year of 2025. And we're also proposing to eliminate Moose Area 3, Parker Lake. It shows up again. And these are in association with those changes to land access management by the Forest Service, allowing more access to that area. So kind of just tidying up the WAC, really. 24 comments received, general support, general opposition. There was general desire for increased permit levels and for permits in new areas, and then comments not specific to the proposals put forward. Okay, WAC 224-15-120, Bighorn sheep seasons, permit quotas and areas. First up, again, modifying the WAC to reflect the existing license year of 2025. The second proposal is to reduce the number of permits from 2 to 0 for the Manson Special Hunt and the Any Ram category. We're proposing this change because there's not a lot of mature rams in the Manson population, certainly not enough really to fulfill the once-in-a-lifetime expectation for this permit category. And also from a biological perspective, we'd like to see more of the juvenile rams that are in there, that cohort mature, ensuring we have plenty of mature rams both available for harvest and for sort of the biological needs of that population. So as that population continues to, the juvenile ram cohort graduates into the mature ram category, you'll see us bring back a proposal for permits in this population. A third proposal is to reduce the number of permits from 1 to 0 for the Mountain View Black Butte Special Hunt, again in the Any Ram category. So this is our Rocky Mountain Bighorn Hunt, southeastern Washington. It's one that we share because of the Wanaha drainage. We share this hunt with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and we rotate that every 3 years. We had it in 2024, Oregon gets it in 2025, CTUIR in 2026, and at which point we'll bring this back to propose to have it back in Washington in 2027. The table below here just shows you these basic proposals. 43 comments received, represented in the general themes of support and opposition, a desire for increased permit levels and seeing permits put into new areas, and then comments not specific to the proposals. Okay, mountain goat seasons, special permit quotas and areas. So again, modifying the WAC description from 2024 to 2025. And then we'd also propose to reduce the number of special permits to 0 for the Bumping River, Chowder Ridge, Lincoln Peak, and Avalanche Gorge. Chowder Ridge, Lincoln Peak, and Avalanche Gorge collectively represent the Mount Baker mountain goat population, which has exhibited fairly steep declines in recent years. We don't like the harvest trends. We don't like where this population is trending. Getting very close to the threshold of just simply eliminating the hunt altogether. We'd like to pause harvest from the state side in this population, give this population an opportunity to rebuild. As it rebuilds, again, we'd like to propose some permit in the future, depending on what our monitoring data tell us. But for now, the conservative approach is to just pause harvest and allow this population to rebuild to the fullest extent that it can, maximizing that opportunity for it to rebuild. Similar story in Bumping River. We've seen this population decline. It no longer meets the criteria for us to offer a hunt, and therefore proposing to remove that from the hunt tables. 54 comments received represented as general support, general opposition. There is concern being expressed about lost opportunity, concern about desire for increased permit levels rather than seeing decreased permit levels, and then comments not specific to the proposals, notably discussion of our translocation effort that we did in partnership with the federal government many years ago. That concludes our ungulate-related rulemaking proposals, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Director, we didn't hear you. It says you're muted.
No.
Nope, still quiet.
Anise, were you going to speak?
No, I know.
All right. Well, I
You
think.
just can't hear the director at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Go ahead.
Director Sussman, just kind of the nod of your head. Do you have any questions that you have at this moment? Okay.
Okay, well, that takes us into the last part of today's public hearing. That's taking public testimony. We'll take verbal comments from attendees. And let me go over that a little bit with folks who plan on speaking. If you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand feature, which is usually it's like a little yellow hand at the bottom of your screen feature at the and press that button, and we'll know that you're ready to speak. As a reminder, keep your comments to about 3 minutes or less. Everyone who is attending is currently muted. When it's your turn to speak, Jamie Lee, our agency rules analyst, will unmute you, and she will unmute you so that you can speak. At that time, please state your name for the record, just as if you were attending the meeting in person, and the WAC or rule that you're submitting your comment about. Staff who will present today will be listening and considering your testimony. However, staff will not be responding today to comments or questions received during the meeting. So at this point, I'll ask Jamie to call out those individuals who signed up or registered to speak.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to call the 2 individuals first that pre-registered, and then I do see that there were some other hands that popped up, so we will call those individuals afterwards. So the first name I have on my list is Stacy Ross. Stacy Ross, I'm assuming you are under the name Molly and Stacy. I'm going to say allow to talk. Can you please confirm that? Is this,
Yes,
is this Stacy Ross?
yes, ma'am.
The floor is yours. There is a little bit of an echo, so I don't know if there's 2 devices on.
I got a cell phone, but I'm gonna go on the cell phone.
If you want to give it a test run, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I can still hear you, but there is still an echo.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, that is much better.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you want my comment now?
Yes, please.
Okay, on 371 alkali for the quality. My family and I and many friends put it on that quality for years and years and years. And now to take it away from the quality, we when it comes to the rest of the quality hunts in the state of Washington, we use a ghost hunt, and the only one we want to put in on is just that quality. So my question is, if you my points that I've got built up in all my family, if you move all that to to bull, I'm done. Now I don't have any points in the bull. What do we do about my points? Do I get to keep my points and transfer them, or what do we do? Are you there?
Yes. Do you have any more comment?
Other than that, if you go back on the date, if you could even split the bull from the, so you still got the quality, half bull. That's all I really got to say.
Well, thank you very much. If you are done, I'm going to go ahead and mute you.
Okay.
We're going to move on to Scott Whitman, Whitman. Scott, are you here? There's a couple names or hands raised, and I don't know which one is that. If I could have everyone just lower their hands for right now, so I can figure out which one is Scott Whitman. Scott, are you under, is this you?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Okay, Scott Whitman. I worked for Department of Fish and Wildlife from 2014 to 2021 in the Region 4 Conflict Program. And first of all, I want to comment on the proposed changes as it relates to the elk hunts in Region 4. I oppose the hunt change in the Nooksack GMU 418 from the quality hunt to the bull hunt. I went back and looked, and since 2015, the Nooksack hunt has averaged about 2,000 applications per year. And monetarily for the quality hunt, that's about a little over $26,000 a year that brings in applications for that hunt. Many hunters I have spoken to only apply for this hunt. And so by moving this hunt category, it's taking away the hunter's choice on how to use their quality points that they've accumulated. It also leaves two side-by-side bull hunts with GMU 437 the Sauk and 418 in the same category as bull hunt. Another reason I think it should be kept in the quality category is the department has always had a great relationship with Sierra Pacific Industries that allows access to the private timberland. And this is the only hunt that I'm aware of where they provide key gated access to the hunters that are selected for this hunt without charging any additional fee to the hunter to access their land. And again, I would like to see the department foster that relationship under the quality category for that elk hunt. Second, I also oppose the elimination of 8 master hunter permits in Region 4 North. The proposal is to reduce those permits from 13 to 5. These permits historically have been part of the negotiated permits with the Point Elliott Treaty Tribes in the shared harvest of GMU 418 and 437. So by simply eliminating those, it's changing the equity in those hunts in those two GMUs. And if the intent for the agency is to reduce antlerless elk harvest, my suggestion would be is to move those 8 permits that are proposed to be eliminated into other hunt categories, provide bull hunt opportunities either in GMU 418 or 437. And I guess lastly, I would just want to say that I do support the proposal to change GMU 407 from any elk to 3-point bull. I think the landscape in GMU 407 between private and public lands has changed, which will likely accommodate some more elk on the landscape there. And that's all I have for comments. And I just thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to go ahead and mute you now. Dave, you have had your hand up, so I'm going to unmute you and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Dave, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. The floor is yours.
My name is David Pease. I live in Central Washington, and I witnessed there was a special hunt for elk, for bull elk here this earlier in this year, and I learned that the hunter, the person that has the permit, is allowed to have a helper or two, or helpers, and in our case, it turned into being more than a dozen, sometimes 5 trucks full of hunters with glassing. And I thought glassing is part of the hunt. So it seemed to be more of a gang situation. A lot of people helping this one person. And I just don't know if there is a rule maybe in the future to be able to quantify and, select the helpers to a fixed number, to where the people, they would be part of that license and that hunt, versus just many others that represent that person without real authorization. So I will follow back with Kyle unless he could respond to that. through online, but I appreciate all the information today. I learned a lot. I'm a non-hunter, but I love to take pictures, and we have a lot of elk on our property. And so I just would like to see it level the playing field a bit and not have gang hunting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to go ahead and mute you now. Molly and Stacy, you still have your hand raised. Are you wanting to ask another question or state another comment? Nope.
No, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Okay, calling last time for any public comment on 2025 season setting. All right, Scott, the public comment has closed.
Okay, thank you. So this will conclude our meeting today, our public hearing. I want to thank everyone who provided their testimony in terms of comments, and to all of those who have submitted written comments to the department during the open comment period. We expect to receive a decision from the director after March the 24th this month, after the decision briefing, which will occur on that date. That meeting will not be recorded, but the decision will be posted online and announced in an upcoming Fish and Wildlife official communication news release. You can also look online at the agency's rulemaking webpage to find out the outcome of the rule project. Thank you again to everyone who participated, and this concludes today's public hearing. Thanks.